Okay, Rabbi Sai. So we started last week talking about the very hotly contested sugya of brain death, and we brought the very fascinating hands-on laboratory test that Mendelssohn Orbach did, which dealt with taking off a head of a sheep. So refer to that shear. And we said that the question of brain death is going to be, it hinges upon three Gemaras. Again, what was the issue? The issue was a person, when his brain death cannot breathe on his own, just not breathing on his own, but the second you get air into him, the rest of his body, at least for a while, works. The heart, the lungs, the livers, these do not need the brain. These actually can work without the brain. They have an internal mechanism. The heart has an internal mechanism. At least for a while, it will work without any brain at all. You don't need a brain at all. You can actually take the heart out of the person and put it in a jar, and if it has the right environment, it will still pump on its own.
What's causing the heart to pump without the brain?
It needs blood. It has an internal system that keeps it pumping. It doesn't need to connect to the brain, and doesn't even need to be connected to the spine. It will work for a while, and also the rest of the body. But breathing, you will not breathe. There's a vagus nerve that basically makes the diaphragm go up and down, that makes the muscles work. And if the brain stem is dead, you will not breathe, no matter what. Okay, Rabbi side. So we said we got to talk about three different Gemaras, and we will talk about three different Gemaras, but we have to take a detour. To fully appreciate this issue, everyone is quoting a certain tshuva from the Chassam Sofer, and has a source, and therefore we have to know what this tshuva is about, and we may have to take a detour for a week or two about this issue. What is this about? So in the year 1772, the Count of Mecklinburg, right? His Majesty, the Count of Mecklenburg, whoever he may be, the glorious Count of Mecklenburg, made an edict. And it was a humane edict. What was the edict? You cannot bury someone until he is dead for at least 3 days. Meaning, from when you get a death certificate, he made a decree. You have to wait 3 days or until we see actual decay starting on the corpse, right? And the body starts to change colors, etc. Why did he do this? It seems that there were cases where people were buried alive. They were mistakenly given a birth certificate, and somehow or other, right before they were getting to be buried, they sort of woke up and say, hey, what's for lunch? And basically, in order to avoid that issue, right? So this sounds like Edgar Allan Poe, right? This is what Edgar Allan Poe was all worried about, being buried alive, right? So it seems that there was this fear, and therefore his benevolent and magnificent Count Mecklenburg said, you gotta wait for 3 days before you bury the guy. Okay, now, the question is, what does the Torah say about this? So, obviously you can understand the rabbis weren't too happy about this, but there was one Chacham named Moshe Mendelssohn. Who is Moshe Mendelssohn? He is the father of the Reform movement, or the father of the Enlightenment. It's not right to say the Reform movement. He's the father of the Enlightenment. Now, Moshe Mendelssohn is we could spend a year studying who exactly he was and what his intent was. But basically, he was very well accepted in Germany. He was like best friends with Immanuel Kant. He was like way up there in the world of philosophy in Germany, and he was well accepted amongst all the circles. And he was frum. There was no question he was frum. He kept all Torah mitzvahs. But he had this thing that he felt that the Jews should sort of enter into society and to get a little bit more acculturated. And he was a big proponent of people going to college, from Jews going to college. So what exactly did he want is a big argument. Did he want to basically create like a YU type of thing, like a rabbi doctor, and not to give an iota, not to give an iota of not keeping halacha? I would like to think that's what he wanted. There are others who say that no, he actually wanted to get rid of the Gemara. He wanted to basically only to have Torah Shabbat Ksav, and so to get rid of a lot of the trappings that we find from the Gemara, a lot of the rabbinical mitzvahs. He has big 19 huge books. He wrote a commentary on the Chumash called the Beer, very famous commentary. I'm not going to sit and start delving into all of his work to try to figure out, was he more for just being frum but being more educated, a little bit more secular, or was he trying to get rid of some of the mitzvahs? I'm not going to go there. But whatever it is, he is well known as the father of the Enlightenment movement, Mendelssohn. And again, he, at least in his lifetime, he conversed and wrote with the Gedolim. And sadly enough, when he had 6 kids and 4 of them became Christians. So that doesn't show good. That's not good for the scorecard. And the other 2, basically, he has no Jewish progeny alive nowadays. But again, it doesn't really prove anything because a lot of kids went off the derech in those days. Even from the finest, it happened in the best of houses. So it doesn't really prove anything. But again, you could go and study Moses Mendelssohn. He's a worthy figure to study for a year or 2. But this is what it was. So Moses Mendelssohn wrote a letter to the Yeshivat. Who's the Yeshivat? Of Yaakov Emden, right? Son of the Chacham Tzvi, right? So he wrote a letter to the Yeshivat saying, you know what? It's not such a bad idea. This takana of the count, we shouldn't fight against it. We should uphold the takana, wait for 3 days. What's the big deal? Well, wait for 3 days. The guy gets up, great. If he doesn't get up, so we'll bury him 3 days later. What is the big deal? Okay? That was the issue. Basically, forestalling burying a guy for 3 days to make sure for sure he's dead. Now, so the Yeshivat was not happy, and he wrote him a scathing letter back saying he's wrong. You can't wait 3 days, you can't even wait 1 day. Now, where are these letters? In a sefer called Bikurei Ha'itim. Now, I'm trying to find these books, and everyone's quoting them, Bikurei Ha'itim. No, but you're not going to find these books, because these are Torah journals written by the Haskalah people, basically by the Reform rabbis. Again, it's not so right to say Reform, because Reform didn't really exist in those days. It was like quasi going toward that direction. So I go to Oitzah's farm and I can't find them. Like, what? They're supposed to have everything over here. No, but they don't have the Torah journals. They're Torah, they're Halachic journals, but written basically by the Enlightenment people and Reform rabbis. So I go to HebrewBooks.com. I can't find it. And I couldn't get it off the line. I don't know. I'm sure there's a way to do it. I just couldn't figure it out. So I went to outside. I went to my first Reformed Jew. I said, you certainly have Bikurei Ha'itim in your house, right? The Torah journal from the Reform. It's like, what? What are you talking about? So they didn't have it either. So I couldn't find it. Be as it may, in that Torah journal, which is over a couple of years, it was a periodical. So there's a letter back and forth between the Yeshivat and Rabbi Moshe Mendelssohn about this issue. So a little background before the background. Where does this come from that you got to bury someone? Maybe you don't got to bury someone, right? Where do we know that from? So it's actually a pasuk in the Chumash. A pasuk in the Chumash that talks about burying. Now it's actually not. After all that, I didn't bring. Oh, here we go. Here's one. So after all that, so the pasuk in the Chumash it's actually not an open pasuk. That is the reality. It's in the beginning of Parashat Kisei. From here we learn the concept of burial. So it says over here, right, in Parashat Kisei, it says here that someone who is chayiv misa, talisa yisal eitz. After you kill him, to add insult to injury, you also hang him, right? And the question is, what type of sinner are we talking about? Is it someone who just was over on Birkas Hashem? Birkas Hashem is a euphemism to say he cursed God. If you curse God, you are chayiv misa. Or we're talking about all chayiv skila. The halacha is all chayiv skila. Anyone who gets skila, after you stone him and after you throw him off the roof, whatever, you subsequently hang him up. Okay? In order to basically embarrass him, degrade him. So what does it say? Humas, kill him. The talisa yisal eitz, and hang him on the tree. Again, we're not killing him by hanging. You don't kill him by hanging. The guy's dead already. You hang up a dead guy. Okay? There's no hanging in according to Torah law. There's a death by choking, but not the classical hanging. Don't, keywords, don't, his body should not remain on the gallows. The gallows. Bury him by Yomahu that day. right? Ki kilos alakim toli. For a hanged person is a curse of God. And don't contaminate your land. So here we're particularly talking about a particular type of person, someone who is chayiv misa. And the simple reading of the pasuk is, okay, you got to degrade him, you got to embarrass him, put him on a tree, but don't leave him on the tree overnight. Don't leave him on the tree overnight. That's already too much. Bury him that day. Right? Again, simple reading of the pasuk has not talking about the regular, just a regular person who dies. But the Gemara in Sanhedrin, we all know the Gemara in Sanhedrin, brings this down and says, here is the Torah source that for two important things, not to be confused. The Torah source, A, you have to bury someone. Maybe don't bury him. Maybe cremate him, right? No, you got to bury him. And two is you can't procrastinate. You can't delay. Where do you learn that from? Loy sullen. From the loy sullen means, so again, the simple reading is don't leave him hanging on the tree. But the rabbis say it means don't leave any person, bury him right away. Loy sullen. Don't leave him, simply means don't leave him overnight, bury him that day. And cover tikran, who tells you the concept of burying in the first place. So the Gemara says, it's actually Mishnah. Loy zibavad, elakol hamalon es meisai over beloy sase. Anyone who leaves a dead guy and doesn't bury him right away, homachloikis, it means before daybreak or before nightfall, whatever it is. But for Yerchayiv sake, and we all know that there's an exception to the rule. But if Halina Lechvayda, that we know, you could postpone a funeral if you're waiting to bury him for his covet. What does it mean, his covet? No one's going to need people to come to the Levayat. Right? Nebuch, there were so many Levayats now, there were cries, there were calls that people should come to random Levayats because no one was showing up. Because all of a sudden 1,400 people being buried the same day, right? Basically. So it's a very, very sad situation. So if for a reason, right? We all know that, right? You bring some teretz soil, you can bury him 2-3 days later. We all know if there's a good enough reason, a lechvayde is called, you need tachrichim, whatever it is, then you could wait. Okay? And that's the Gemara. All the how exactly you learn out from the Pesukim, all this stuff. That's the bottom line, right? So every good Jew knows you got to bury your dead, and you're over alive if you delay it. You delay it. Now, there is a Chavis Yoyer who questions whether this is the Eraisa or not. This that we have to A, bury, B, not to delay, is it the Eraisa? He has a whole huge shaila there. We can't go. We actually once referenced it from a long time ago. A whole huge shaila that the government was holding a Jewish murderer who was killed already. A Jewish murderer who was killed already, and they were holding his body for ransom. The question is, he was dealing with: do you have to ransom the body to get it buried, or you don't have to ransom the body to get it buried? He's talking to the sugya, and in his talk, he said, maybe this whole business of burying someone, or at least delay. Maybe it's only Durabanan. And he says he has some pretty good proof that it's only Durabanan. Why? First of all, it says here you can't delay the burial. You can't delay the burial. But if it's for the honor of the dead person, you could delay the burial. That sounds very rabbinic. Usually on Deraisa level, you usually don't have these. Oh, there's an exception to the rule. There ain't no exception to the rules usually on Deraisa. So just that exception sort of tells us that it may be only rabbinical, this that you can't delay. Two is, the halacha is if, you can't get involved, very complicated case, but basically, you could uphold a dead guy being buried if the inheritors don't want to pay the debtors of the dead guy. So basically, whatever the case is, Harry's dead. George says Harry owes him a lot of money. And the Yorshim, the people who got Harry's estate aren't behaving. They're not paying George. George could sort of make it that we delay burying the dead guy. So wait a minute. If it's deraisa, they have to bury someone because of money. You're going to allow someone not to be buried. Okay, so that also lends itself that it's only derabanan to delay burying someone. And by the way, the Gemara itself sort of intimates that the whole thing is D'Rabbanan. Not only delaying, but even burying is D'Rabbanan. Because the Gemara asks over here, famous Gemara, we all know this. The Gemara says, what's the reason why you got to bury someone? The Gemara says, is the reason because of kapara? Or is the reason because of bizayin? What's the reason you got to bury someone? Ibailu, kfur rishon bizayin or rishon kapara? Is it because of kapara? You know, it's good to basically decompose. You know, you did some averas, but if you decompose and the worms eat you, well, that counts for something, and you get yourself a ticket to paradise. Or bizayin. Bizayin, what Bizayin means, that it's called a disgrace for the family, that the guy, the head of the family member is just lying around and decaying and decomposing. What type of question is this? What is the reason of kfura? Is it because of this? Is it because of that? God said you got to bury. And the Gemara is debating, maybe you don't got to bury a tzaddik because he doesn't need a kapara. So that already implies, this Gemara implies, that the whole entire concept of kfura is D'Rabbanan, right? So we brought you some proofs that maybe procrastinating is D'Rabbanan, maybe the whole burying is D'Rabbanan. Okay? The Mishnah says black and white, green and yellow. And I don't want to say, yeah. Any other, it says that it's alav. Well, says the Chavis Yor, a lot of times the Gemara exaggerates. We got lots of exaggerations in the Gemara. The Gemara says openly in Yuma, anyone who says sichas chulin, anyone who just has casual conversation, the Gemara says you're over an alav. And the Gemara says anyone who has hana from a cheapskate, right? You know a guy's a cheapskate, but you sort of like force him to invite you over for a meal. You're over an alav. Anyone who goes from Babel to Stroll, you're over an alav. Anyone who counts Jews, right? That's why we say Yeshivat Ohr Somayach when we count the minyan. We don't say 1, 2, 3. You're over alav. And clearly, all of those Gemaras are exaggerations. You're not over alav if you just talk about the Mets. Maybe the Mets, yes. But if you just talk about sports or whatever, you're not over alav if you just have sichas chulin. These are all exaggerations. He brings other proofs. It says anyone doesn't go to the bathroom when he's supposed to, you're over alav. He says it's not really alav. All these are exaggerated. Anyone who does the machlokes, the pasuk says you shouldn't be like Korach and Kadosai. That really means that you shouldn't fight about kahuna. But the Gemara takes it and says it means you shouldn't have any type of fights. He brings a whole slew of examples. That when the Torah, a lot of times the Gemara says, if you do this, you're going to burn in hell and it's all terrible. Take it easy. It's an exaggeration. It doesn't really mean it. So even though the Gemara says it's a lav, it doesn't really mean it's a lav. But says the Chavis, so therefore, maybe when the Mishnah says over here that if you procrastinate, you delay the burial, it's a lav, it doesn't really mean it. It's only rabbinical. At the end of the day, my fine friends, the Chavis Yar says, even though it's true, we do find in the Gemara, sometimes the Gemara exaggerates, and we'll say, if you do A, B, C, or over a lav, in the Mishnah, you'll never find such a thing. The Mishnah never exaggerates. If the Mishnah said you're over a lav, you are over a lav. And therefore, even though he entertains that maybe burial is D'Rabbanan and maybe procrastinating is D'Rabbanan, at the end of the day, the Chavis Yor says clearly it's not true. It's D'Oraisa, and every Rishon and every Achron you're going to interview, they will tell you it's D'Oraisa. What do you do with the problems that we had? That's for a different shir. But everyone will tell you to bury is D'Oraisa and to delay is D'Oraisa. And that's the bottom line, right? So therefore, when Mr. Count, what's the name over there? From Mecklinburg, said, well, what's the big deal? We'll just wait a couple of days. No, it's not. It is a big deal. It is a big deal because you will be over on a derisa. Again, people try to say, oh, that's what Moses Mendelssohn said. Moses Mendelssohn was a Talmud Chacham. He knew his thing too. He said, oh, look at the Chavis Yor, maybe it's Rabbanon. We don't want to get the count upset. You don't want to get the count upset. So it's no big deal. At the end of the day, not burying definitely is derisa and delaying is derisa. So the bottom line is, you would say, it's an open and shut pasuk. Bottom of the pasuk says, "Lo yisal nivzasei al ki covered to b'yayimahu." I mean, it's black and white. Bury that day. I mean, it's pretty clear. It's got to be that day. It can't be 3 days later, right? Oh, now that's what you would say. It's like pretty clear. Now, the thing is, there's a famous person named Maritz Chietz. Maritz Chietz was also. It was a major Talmud Chacham, but he also was a little bit in the Moscow camp, a little bit. He was a very, very interesting figure, because he was nothing like Moses Mendelssohn, God forbid. He was a Abed, he was a used Talmud Chacham, but he also had like a doctorate in everything, a doctorate in philosophy and everything. He was very, very well, very well educated. And if you want to read about him, you could go to, if you know, there's a famous woman named Rebbetzin Bruria. She was just nifter. She's the Rosh Yeshiva. She's the daughter of Hutner's. The daughter of Rav Hutner. Supposedly she wrote the Pachizik or edited or the language of it. And she got her PhD in philosophy from Columbia in 1971. And her dissertation was on this fellow named Moritz Chitz, was on this big Rav. And the whole paper is about, was he a Maskil, wasn't he a Maskil, how he was able to synthesize secular with the Kedusha. But he doesn't make. The Moritz Chitz wrote a letter to the Chassam Sofer. And he was talking about something else. He was talking about, there was another edict from some other fellow, another Count Dracula, I don't know, another Count, said, you gotta like 10 times check the guy's dead before you bury him. And there was a Kohen who was a doctor. And the Kohen wanted to know, could he go check him? That was the issue, could he go check him? Because he's probably been dead already for a day or two, but maybe not. That's what the Moritz Chitz was dealing with. And he sent a letter to the Chassam Sofer. And in the letter, Moritz Chitz mentions Moses Mendelssohn, and he mentions the edict of the Count of Mecklinburg, which happened 60 years awaiting 3 days. And he sort of mentions, it was well accepted that they waited for 3 days. So his point was that, you see, we are worried that maybe the guy's not dead, so maybe it's not so bad for a Kohen to check it out. That's the context of what's going on over there. Okay? Now, between me and you, this is like preposterous. I mean, I don't understand. In the year 1800, people have been dying for a long time. It's been around for a while, right? The graveyard is filled with indispensable people, right? You remember that one? Right? People have been dying for a long time. All of a sudden, the year 1800, Moritz Chitz is saying, you know what, maybe we should wait for 3 days. What has been going on for the last 2,000 years in Halacha, right? All of a sudden? So it's like a little bit strange that all of a sudden the Moritz Chitz should start saying, maybe it's okay. But if you look at the letter, he's also doing the same thing. He's saying, maybe we can make the Count happy. Maybe there's something to it, and therefore we can sort of like deviate a little bit. So, what's the bottom line is? The Rabbi Moses Mendelssohn brings 4 proofs that you could wait for 3 days from the Gemara. 4 proofs. One of them is really bad, but the other 4 or 5 are actually pretty good proofs. So this Moses Mendelssohn, he knew a thing or two. Let me tell you something. And the Moritz Chitz also uses all these proofs, and it's a big. So what's the first proof? The first proof is the Gemara in Yevamos, but that really is just a mistake. That's just a. No, it's just a misreading of the Gemara. Because over there, the Gemara in Yevamos is talking about waiting for 3 days. The Mishnah in Yevamos says, and Daf Kuf Chav, Ein me'idin ela ad gil yom. So it's talking about there to find out whether a his husband is dead or not. So you could read the Mishnah saying, you want to know if a woman's husband is dead or not? You got to wait for 3 days. So you could read it means you can't verify 1,000% that a guy's dead until after 3 days. Meaning if he's laying like a log for 3 days and not moving, then you could verify that he's dead. But until then, the woman can't get married because maybe he'll wake up after 2 days or 2.5 days. But the truth is it's just taking the Mishnah out of context. That's not what the Mishnah is talking about there. The Mishnah is talking about a decomposing body. After 3 days, you can't look at it and say, I know who it is. The Mishnah is talking about a body that's decomposing. Nebuch, if you follow the news, there are still 280 people that they have not been able to identify. Which I really don't understand how that could be, but that's what's going on. There are 280 people that they don't know who they are. I don't understand. Aren't people missing? Don't they? But that's what it is. That's what I just read in the news yesterday. So this Mishnah, when it says you have to wait, it doesn't mean we know George died. Well, wait 3 days to make sure that George is dead. Just don't leave it. Make sure that he doesn't move for 3 days. That's the way someone to read it, but that's a mistake. That's not what the Mishnah is talking about. The Mishnah is talking about someone's body who's decomposing. After 3 days, you can't really recognize him anymore because he gets so bloated or he decomposes so badly, you can't recognize who the person is anymore. So the raya from the Yavamis is just not doesn't get too far. But the other rayas are pretty good because we have here a Mishnah in Smachos, right? I need an Avodah Zarah. So Smachos, right? If you go right Avodah Zarah, if you go at the end and back of Avodah Zarah, there are small mesechtas. So it's something called a Mishnah Smachos, which is really called Eva Rabasi. It's the same thing. It's a euphemism. Smachos is about happiness. It ain't very happy. It's all about death. So it's usually called Eva Rabasi, but over here it's Smachos. So whoever learns this stuff, or Chaim Kanievsky has books on every one of these small mesechtas they're called, and it says here, black and white. It says, the Mishnah says, go and after you bury a person, go ahead and you should visit him for 3 days. After you bury him, go visit him for 3 days. And don't worry about dark game worry. Don't think it's some type of necromancy or some type of witchcraft. There's a story here that they visited someone after being buried and the second day, and he woke up and he said, if you want to get rid of me, you could have done it a nicer way. You got to bury me alive. And he lived for 25 years. And there's a story that they buried someone, and he woke up, and he had 5 children. And then he died. I don't know why I said that, but anyway, that's what it says there. So what do we see from the Mishnah? That it used to be the custom, after you bury a guy, they would visit at least 3 days to make sure the guy was really dead. And it says here, lo and behold, it happened that the guy sometimes wasn't dead. And he was alive for a guy lived for 25 years, and he had 5 kids. So here you... I guess so. So Rachman is asking the question. We'll get to what Rachman is saying. Rachman is saying what? The guy lived 2 days underground, and then he woke up after 2 days, and right, what's going on over there? But that's exactly what Moses Mendelssohn said. What's going on over here? Because if you ever go on one of these tours, they show you the old graveyards. What are the old They didn't bury people in the ground. They buried them in caves. And they actually, in the good old days, they didn't fill the cave with dirt. They put the guy in a cave, and they just maybe sealed the cave a little bit. Sometimes they left holes in them. So it could be that you were buried, but you had air, and people could actually see you. What was going on? That's what the Modus Mendelssohn says. He says, yeah, of course, in the good old days, they didn't wait for 3 days. They buried you right away, because there was a 99% chance that you were dead. But there was a safety system. There was a safeguard, because the way they buried in the good old days, if you were alive, you wouldn't die right away because you did have air, and they would come check out every day. Once a day, they would check you out, and they would knock on the window. And if you would knock back, they say, "Oh, you're still alive! Wow, great! Go home and wash the dishes. Great, right?" So says Moses Mendelssohn, yeah, that wasn't the good old days. So nowadays, the way we put them in the ground, we put dirt on them. So over here, if the guy's alive, he's not going to wake up. You're killing him. So in our days, it makes sense to wait for 3 days. That's a good proof. That's the proof of this Mishnah. In the good old days, you didn't have to wait for 3 days because you could check it out. Somebody made a mistake. But nowadays, the way we bury people, seemingly you should have to wait 3 days. That's one proof from Moses Mendelssohn. And then the Chayr is a very strong proof. It's basically an open Gemara in Nida. An open Gemara in Nida. Right? What's the Gemara in Nida? So we all know there's different type of tumas, right? We all know that. And nowadays, none of this is too relevant. You think life is hard nowadays? In the good old days when there was tum and tires, life was really difficult. It was a whole, I don't know how they managed. Like I'm barely managing now. But it was really, really difficult. People lived in different houses. It wasn't so simple. But be as it may, we all know there's different levels of tumah, and we know that based on what type of tumah you are, there are different ways you could make other things tumah. So there's something called a zav and a zava, and those are basically the highest levels of tumah. What is a zav? It's a person, a man who has some type of emission. We don't know exactly what it is nowadays, but whatever it is, it is. And this has a very high level of tumah, that even if the zav is sitting on a stone, and on the bottom of the stone there's a kli, so you got this huge heavy stone, and don't ask me how, but on the bottom of the stone there's this kli, and he's sitting on it, the kli's tummy, right? That's the law. What is that called? Even Mesama, right? Anyone who learns the Tumatayra sees this all the time. But Tumas Mace, you don't have that. A dead person doesn't have that. If you have a dead person that's on a stone, and so there's no oil, for whatever reason, it makes a chatitza, but what's under the stone is not. Fine. It's not tummy. That's the zav and zav. Now, the Gemara says over here, like this. The Gemara says that a zav and zava, they are metame until their flesh starts to decay. Meaning, a zav and zava is dead. You cannot be dead and be a zav and zava. You can be tamei mace. You can't be dead. But the din d'Rabbanan that even though a zav and zava is dead, we make believe that they're alive until their body starts decaying. Because then everyone knows that they're dead. The Gemara says, why? I don't understand. Dead is dead. Once you can't be a zav and zava when you're dead. You can't be, it's called about need too. You can't be a needy when you're dead, right? So the Gemara says, well, Zera Shemayit Alpha. Well, we're afraid that maybe they just fainted. So you got Mr. Zav and Zava, anyway, he's not doing too good, and then he dies to boot, right? What's a Zava? A Zava is just a lady who has a period not at the right time. That's pretty common nowadays, right? That's why a woman has to go to a certain type of mikvah more than a man. A woman could actually be tummy nowadays a Zava. It's possible, right? So basically, but a Zav, we don't know what it is, what it isn't. That's why it gets very complicated going up to higher bias. You may be taking a risk because you may be a Zav, but you say, no, we don't know if you're a Zav. It gets very complicated about the issue going on to higher bias. But either way, so we have a Zav and a Zava. So once they're dead, there's no Tumas Zava Zava. There'll be Tumas Mace. But we said Tumas Mace is a lower level, actually. Tumas Mace is no Even Mesama. You don't have the special din of anything that's under you is called Tameh. The Gemara says, even though Zav and Zava is dead, it's still Tameh. Why? Zera Shema Yisalfa. We're afraid maybe the guy didn't die. You think he's dead, but he ain't dead. He just fainted. And how do you have to wait? You have to wait until until his flesh starts to decay. Until his stomach bursts open, or he starts really deteriorating. So wait a minute. What does this Gemara say here? This Gemara says, for a seemingly a very nominal issue about Tumah, and seemingly Mr. and Mrs. Zav and Zav are dead. No. We're afraid they're still alive and they're Tameh until we know for sure they're dead. What's that? When they start decaying. So wait a minute. If you're worried about that, if you're worried about that they're dead, that they're still alive, for tumah issues, certainly you shouldn't bury them. You shouldn't bury them. If it says over here, we're worried that everyone thinks they're dead. Zav and Zav is dead. No, maybe not. Maybe they fainted. And you got to wait until the body starts decaying, until it starts getting livid, right? Purple and blue, whatever it is, right? You got to wait until that. So certainly you shouldn't bury someone. This is a very good proof. This is a really good proof. Good for Moses Mendelssohn. Good for him. That's a really great proof. Okay. So we had not such a great proof from the Gemara in Yevamos. We had a pretty good proof from the Mishnah in Evra Abasi. We had a very good proof from the Mishnah in Nida. And then we have another proof from a Ramah. Now, again, I know this all sounds preposterous, so we should wait for 3 days? And that's what we talk about here. That's what we're talking about. Waiting for 3 days before you bury someone. So on the other hand, we know through history you didn't do that. But here we're seeing pretty good proof that you should do that. And whatever happened in history, happened in history. So we have here a famous Ramah. What is it talking about? It has to do exactly what we talked about last week. We said last week, when a mother dies, we know for sure a mother died that the baby is dead. The baby will not survive if the mother dies. But there is an exception to the rule. And that's why he did it last week, the whole test was cutting off the sheep. If the baby was alive, then it must be the sheep was alive. Right? That was the whole point of the laboratory test last week. The Gemara in Erechim makes exception to the rule. And even though it's true, when the mother is dead, automatically the baby's dead, automatically we know that even the death of the baby preceded the death of the mother. But there's one exception. If the mother dies in childbirth, it could be the child will live. That's the Gemara, it's open Gemara. That's called Yeshivat Ohr Somayach, right? Someone who's sitting on the, they used to have these stones that when they used to give birth, birthing stone, whatever they call them. So it says over there, what did the Gemara say? So there you go, you have this very tragic, right? Well, let's just talk about very happy things today. So you got a story in the Gemara. A lady dies in childbirth. The Gemara says, you can mechal Shabbos, run and get a knife. Even though you got to walk through Times Square, you got to walk through Straben, and rip open that, you do a C-section. Get that baby out. Get that baby out. Because, hey, why not? The mother's dead anyway. You might as well save the baby. We said the baby's dead. No, in this case, the baby could live. Because since the mother died during childbirth, it is possible the baby's still alive. Fine, that's the halacha. Open word, right? Everyone knows this halacha. Yeshivat Ohr Somayach, Umesa, Levin Sakim B'Shabbos, Afil Del Shrabim, Rekarim Bitna. You rip over her stomach and you take out the fine. But the Ramah says we don't do it nowadays. Ramah says we don't do it nowadays. We don't do it nowadays. Why? We're not sure that the mother's dead. So we have a mother, Nebuch, who just died. And if we open her up right away, we can save the baby. Says the Ramah, don't do anything. Why? Because you think the mother's dead. But you don't know if the mother's dead 100%. And therefore you have to wait a while. And therefore by that time the shorter baby's going to be dead. And even the Chol, forget about Shabbos, even on the weekday, we let the baby die. We let the baby die because you can't open up the stomach of the mother because you may be killing her at that point in time. You don't know 100% she's dead. So here he goes. The Meretz Chiz brings us. What do you see from here? We don't know. Maybe in the times of Gemara they did know, but in our days, the Ramah clearly says we don't know exactly when someone dies. So therefore, it's not so preposterous to say, look, you gotta wait 6 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours, maybe wait 3 days. Yeah, maybe you gotta wait because we don't know. We're not 100% sure that the person died, right? That is riot number 4. Now, if we are, riot number 5, right? So now, if we're already going to bring proof that we are afraid people are not dead, and we have to wait at least for 2-3 days, or wait until the body decays, and if we're talking about Moshe Mendelssohn, he's obviously going to bring a proof from the Navi, right? That he's going to do. He's going to bring a proof from the Navi, because that's what nowadays the Reform people just don't know nothing. But in the good old days, they had class. But they knew Navi, and they were very with the Hebrew language. And he's going to bring a proof from the Navi that you see this concept that you do have to wait, and basically someone could be dead, and everyone thinks he's dead, but he's not really dead. What's the proof? So we have 2 stories in the Navi. We have the story of Eliyahu Navi and Elisha Navi, right? So Eliyahu Navi did Tchias HaMesim, right? We all know Eliyahu did Tchias HaMesim, and that was the famous, with who? With the famous lady, what was her name? Sarfarta, the lady from Sarfarta, which sounds like France, but I doubt it's from France, right? The lady from Sarfarta, right? We all know the famous story, right? I'm not going to go through the whole story, but there was only the kids and neighbors. Eliyahu Navi was a Navi, and right, he and Achav didn't get along so well, and he made a drought for 3 years. Right, Achav wasn't the greatest of guys either. Right, Ahab and Isabel, they weren't too good either. Anyway, basically, so there was a story that there was no food, and he went to visit this lady, and the lady only had a little bit of flour, and miraculously, the flour lasted for Eliyahu Navi blessed it, and this teeny bit of flour, teeny bit of oil lasted for 3 years, and that's the story of that. And then, sure enough, this lady was our hosted Eliyahu Navi, and sadly enough, what happened? The lady's son died. And the lady wasn't too happy. She said, "It's your fault, Eliyahu Navi, because it's your fault that he died." Eliyahu Navi said, "What did I do?" Well, because since you're such a big tzaddik, so God sort of looked at me and looked at you and saw that I wasn't such a big tzaddikus, and that's why I get punished. You know, it's not good to hang around. It's not good to hang around with tzaddikim, because in contrast to the tzaddikim, you know, we're not worth it. So God got angry at me, comparing me to you. Anyway, so Eliyahu Navi said, "Don't worry, I'll bring him back to life. No big deal." And sure enough, Eliyahu Navi did Tchias HaMesim, right? You know the story, right? Good. Okay. You know, you're gonna go to Sunday school, right? Okay, good. And then we have the same story with who? with Elisha. Who was Elisha? He was Eliyahu Navi's student, right? And he did Tchias Mesim actually twice. He actually did twice, right? That was the famous story. Eliyahu went up with the fiery chariot, and Elisha said, "Can you make me as great as you? I want to be greater than you." And Eliyahu said, "Well, if you see me departing up to heavens," because he didn't die, right? He went up with a fiery chariot, right? Not a get taxi, no, a fiery chariot, right? If you see me, then you will be blessed with double power. And sure enough, he saw him, and he did Tchias Mesim twice. Eliyahu did it once, right? It's the story of the Navi, right? Okay, where he did it twice. One case is clear where he did it. The other case is not so clear. But one case is the same story. Basically the same story that the Isha Shunamis, the famous Isha Shunamis, right? That Elisha was hosted by Elisha Shunamis, right? And basically she said, Elisha was so impressed with, he said, "What do you need?" He said, "I need a son." And sure enough, she had a son. And then the son died. And Isha Shunamis got really upset. Went to Elisha, "What do you do this to me? It would have been better if I didn't have a son." And basically, you know the story that Elisha said, "Don't worry, I'll make him." She sent Gehazi, right? Who was Gehazi? Not a very good character. He was assistant, right? Igor, right? But he wasn't. He was assistant that didn't. That he sort of. He took the money, right? Anyway, the Gehazi messed up a little bit, whatever he did, and then Elisha came and did Tchias Mesim. So that's the story. Now, but there's a big problem. Already the Gemara asks, how is it that Eliyahu Hanavi did Tchias Mesim on the child of the Ashes Sepharta? Eliyahu Hanavi was a Kohen. We know Eliyahu Hanavi the Kohen, right? That they taught you in the Who's Pinchas? Pinchas is Eliyahu Hanavi. So Pinchas was like, well, if Pinchas is Eliyahu Hanavi, so how can he do it? Oh, this is a big question. I already told you to ask this question. That's one. So how in the world did Eliyahu Hanavi do Tchias Mesim on? Two is we have a very, very strange Gemara in Nida. A very, very strange Gemara in Nida. Here we are. I'm not going to go through this whole Gemara, but the famous story with the 12 elders challenged Rabbi Yeshua ben Chanina. 12 elders from Alexandria asked him a bunch of questions. And one of the questions were, is Ben Shunamis, if you touch him, are you tummy? I mean, the question was, since the guy was dead, and now he was resurrected, well, maybe he's still considered dead. Meaning, since he was miraculously resurrected, well, maybe he's still considered dead, and maybe if you touch him, he'll still be Matana Mace. So all the Mepharshim say, okay, great question. Okay, maybe he's a ghost or something like that, so he can still make people tummy even though he's walking around alive. But the Gemara asked about Ben Shunamis. Well, there was a story before that about someone who was resurrected. There was a story. Ben Shunamis was the one who was by Elisha. There was a story before that by Eliyahu Navi. So why is the Gemara talking about the Ben Shunamis? Talk about the guy before. There was someone before who was the resurrected. Ben Sepharsa. So from here, Moses Mendelssohn says we can answer both questions in one fell swoop. Why? Because there is actually a difference in the wording when the pasuk depicts Ben Shunamis and when the pasuk depicts Ben Sepharsa. By the case of Ben Sepharsa, it says, "Vayachadar me'ela chala ben ha'isha ba'al tabayis." That's by Eliyahu Navi story. Vayichalya chazik me'oid ad asher loy nasra by neshama. He was so sick until he stopped breathing. When it talks about Ben Shunamis, it just says he died. They brought him to the mom. Vayamat, he died. So it says Moses Mendelssohn, he's coming from some other sources. What do you see? That's the answer. it's possible that you're not breathing and you're still alive. So by the case of Ben Sarfasa, everyone thought that he was dead. But the pasuk indicates he was very, very sick. He wasn't breathing, but it never said openly he died. So in actuality, he didn't die, and therefore Eliyahu Navi was able to touch him because he wasn't dead.
How long did he live?
Wait a minute, that's the punchline. But by Shunamis, Elisha wasn't a claim. I don't know what Shevet Elisha came from, but Elisha wasn't a claim. So Elisha had no problem. By Shunamis, the Ben Shunamis, Taka dead. By Ben Sarfasa, everyone thought he was dead, but he wasn't dead. And therefore Eliyahu Navi could touch him. And therefore the Gemara, when it talks about someone who was resurrected, is he Metalames or not Metalames, the Gemara skips over Ben Sarfasa and goes to Shunamis, because the Gemara knew what Moses Mendelssohn knew, that this guy, the Ben Sarfasa, wasn't really dead. So what do you see from here? What's the point of all this? You can see that even though the pasuk says openly the guy was not breathing, Ben Sarfasa was not breathing, he's still not considered dead. So you can see that someone not breathing, we've got to wait a while. We've got to wait a day or 2 or 3 to really make sure that he's really, really dead. That's the 5th proof of Moses Mendelssohn, that the bottom line is that so 5 proofs that when you think someone is dead, he ain't dead. And you got to wait. Gemara Yavamis, we said the weak raya. The Gemara, the Mishnah in Ever Rabasi says black and white. The guy woke up after 3 days. The Mishnah in the Gemara Nida, black and white. It says they're afraid they fainted. The Ramah that says that nowadays we don't. The Ramah's a big chiddush because we're going to let a fetus die. No, we wait because we think the mother's still alive. And here we have this very interesting story, which I could have really taken to town and make fun of you guys that you don't know any Navi, but I decided to curtail it, that we see from this story that someone could look like dead and he's not dead. So this is really good stuff. How long are we going for?
You haven't used the half of the Sfarim, Rabbi.
47. Rabbi Isai, we haven't even done 10% of what we need to do here today. But wait, there's one problem. There's one problem with everything that's going on over here. Besides the problem that, like, what's been going on for the last 2,000 years. You know, all of a sudden Moses Mendelssohn woke up and said, oh, we've been doing it wrong. We're supposed to be waiting for 3 days. There's only one little problem here. And that problem is that we have an open Gemara that says to the contrary. That's the problem. This is what the Chassam Sofer and the Yavit says to Moses Mendelssohn. And he says, you know, you're really talented, Moses Mendelssohn. And you got all these Gemaras, but you got an open Gemara that says not what you're saying. What's the Gemara? Here we have a Gemara. Everyone knows this Gemara, because this is the Gemara that talks about the Pikuach Nefesh. It says here openly, someone who Nafal HaPilus. Why would he do it? Yes, it could be. Comes up. Nafal HaPilus. So someone who was Nebuch in an avalanche and basically got buried under a bunch of stones. It's Shabbos, and you don't know who the person is. You don't know if the person's alive. You don't know if he's dead. You don't know if it's a guy. You don't know if it's a Jew. Yeah, you dig him out, even though you're Mechal Shabbos. What exactly Chil Shabbos is there is not so clear, but we'll say this Chil Shabbos, you dig him out. If he's alive, you keep on digging him out. If he's dead, just leave him there until after Shabbos. Okay? The Gemara says over here, famous Gemara. The Gemara says over here, and how do you know if someone's dead? So here you are, you're digging, right? Avalanche, right? Right? An avalanche, right? A building's imploded on you, right? Yeah, I didn't want to say it. Right. And so finally you get to the body. You're not sure if he's alive or not. So what do you do? So it says over here, what do you do? The Gemara says, so how do you check? The Gemara says, one man says you check his nose. Check his nose. And one man says you check his heart. Let me check your nose to see if he has a cold. Well, let's say check your nose. You see if his nose. No, obviously it means you take a piece of paper, you put a piece of paper under the nose, and you see, is he breathing or not? Doesn't he check his nose, right? Don't check his nose if he has a. What if he check his nose, right? If a long nose is Jewish, oh, you don't know if it's a guy or Jew. You check his nose. If it's a long nose, you know it's Jewish. No, that's not what I'm talking about here. Nothing to do with that. You check his nose means you check to see if he's breathing or not. That's what it means. Okay? And one says you check his heart, right? Put your ear to his chest. Oh, the Gemara. Well, you've uncovered part. You uncovered part of his body. No. You've uncovered part of him, and now you want to know, and you see he's lifeless. You want to know, should I continue being Mechal Shabbos? Should I continue my efforts to save him? We're talking about Shabbos. So we got to check if he's alive or dead. No. So the Gemara goes through a whole thing here, What are they arguing about? They're arguing about how a baby is created. Is the baby starting to be created from the heart, or is the baby initial creation from the nose? And Gemara says, maybe it has nothing to do with that. Gemara says, leave it alone. Gemara says, you know what? Everyone holds. You can check the nose. Like it says in the pasuk, Kol asher nishmas ruach chaim ba'apav. Like it says in the pasuk in Bereshit, right? Last week's parsha, Kol asher nishmas ruach chaim ba'apav mikol asher b'charav mesa. So the pasuk says anyone who had life in his nose died. So where do you see life is? In the nose, right? So that's the source that you check the nose. And the Gemara says, even the one who says you check the heart, he also holds you can check the nose. The Machlokes is like this. The one who says you can check the heart means if you're uncovering him and you happen to get the heart first, it's enough to check the heart. And the other one says, no, you got to check the nose too. But everyone agrees the nose is enough. Meaning everyone agrees if you get to his head first, it's enough to check his nose. The Machlokes is, let's say you get to his heart first, it's enough just to get to his heart. But what do we see here, my friends? What does the Gemara say here? A guy is stuck in covered with stones in a bad situation. Koch nefesh. As long as you check his nose and he's not breathing, you stop your efforts to save him. Wait a minute. Maybe we said 3 days. Wait until his body's decaying. You got to see that he's livid. You got to see that his stomach burst open. No, it says here openly. We're talking about the Koch nefesh here, right? We're talking about saving a guy, right? It's a question of life and death. All you got to do is check his nose. How long do you check his nose? For 3 days? Doesn't seem that way.
You don't know how long he's been
so here is a black and white Gemara. That's it. You just check his nose, and after a minute or two, you decide he's dead, and you stop saving him. So we can have all the Gemaras we want, but here is a Gemara specifically talking about this. All the other rayas were not direct. They're pretty good rayas, but they're not directly talking about how do you know when a guy is dead or alive. This Gemara is talking specifically how do you know when a guy is dead or alive, and it says openly, check his nose, see if he's still breathing, right? Now, this Gemara is going to be very important. This is the Gemara about brain death. This is where it's all at. Whether it's the heart or the nose, because it says here, check the nose, check the heart. That's where this is all getting to. But be it as it may, says the Chassam Sofer, this is the Gemara. So we may have to figure out all those other 4 rayas, which we're not going to have time to do this week. We'll do next week. But here it says openly, you take 5 minutes to figure out a guy's dead. That's all it'll take. 5 minutes. No more. That's it. Now, me personally, and the Maritz Chitz says, no, not a raya. Not a raya. Not true. Not a raya. Why? Why not a raya? This Gemara is talking when there was a trauma. A regular guy who dies, you got to wait 3 days. 3 days? Here, the Gemara says that it's enough just to check his nose is when there was an avalanche. So there's a reusa. We know this guy's in bad shape. We know this guy just got his head squashed in from an avalanche. So that's when the Gemara says you got to wait. You don't got to wait for 3 days. But every other case, you got to wait for 3 days. Here's the Chassam Sofer sort of loses his patience with the Maritz Chitz. And he says, he goes crazy. He says, first of all, you don't know anything medically. It's just not the way it is. On the contrary, people who go through trauma, there's a bigger chance that you're going to make a mistake of assessing whether they're alive or dead. Because people who go through trauma, a lot of times their body goes to shock for a while, but it could mitapes, it could be rebooted. He doesn't use that word, but it could be rebooted. It could somehow get, so on the contrary, I mean, the Maritz Chitz is coming, oh, look, this guy's, yeah, here we have an indicator that he's dead because he got hit by stones and everything. It's called a reusa. The Maritz Chitz goes to town about chazaktas and reusas. Oh, we see there's evidence. And the Chassam Sofer says, you could use all the lumdus you want, but the bottom line is the opposite. When there's trauma, and that's a well-known fact, because even people who go brain dead, one of the first things you got to find out is why they went brain dead. If they went brain dead because of overdose, or because of, sometimes it happens because what they call when you get very cold and, not ammonia, hypothermia. There are a lot of cases when mamas go brain dead, the whole thing goes, but if it's because of trauma, you could actually reboot the guy. So the Chassam Sofer says, don't tell me that this Gemara is only talking about because there's trauma. Therefore, you only have to wait a couple minutes. On the contrary, when there's trauma, there's more of a reason to wait. Not less of a reason to wait. Because more of a reason that you're making a mistake, that you're not getting it right. And then the Chassam Sofer says, we bring a pasuk here, Kol Shenishma through a Chaim Ba'apov. What are you going to say? That pasuk is only talking about when there was trauma. And therefore, we have this Gemara in Yuma that says black and white, green and yellow. You can ascertain a guy is dead in a couple of minutes. And this is, we all know it's Halacha Ma'aseh, we don't wait 3 days. And this is Chassam Sofer. And Chassam Sofer says, I don't care what you Meretchiz say. I don't care what you Moses Mendelssohn say. I don't care what you Count Dracula say. I don't care about any of this stuff. You don't wait 3 days. And if you do, you're over on a lav. So what we'll have to do is, we'll have to go to the rayas that he brought, because he brought pretty good rayas. So everyone's trying to figure out how to answer up those pretty good rayas, 4 or 5 rayas that you do see that it could be that the guy died and it takes only 3 days to figure out that the guy has died. Me personally, I wouldn't think this is such a great raya from the Gemara, me personally. But no one says it, so I'm just going to keep my mouth shut. But if someone asked me personally, I would say, over here the issue is, should I continue being Mechal Shabbos? So yeah, you know what? If you checked his nose, 99.999% is over with. But to go ahead and bury a guy, that's to actually go ahead and proactively do something. They would say maybe, wait for 3 days. Big deal. Wait for 3 days. Maybe Taka, you should wait for 3 days. I would have made that chilik. Right away, dead. Not to do something proactively. Yeah, you say, well, Pekuch Nefesh. Yeah, but since you checked his nose, we don't care about Pekuch Nefesh anymore. The chances are too thin. But to actually wait for 3 days, because to go ahead and bury him, to be proactive, that's what I would have said. But funnily enough, I don't see anyone say that. So obviously I'm wrong. And obviously the Chassam Sofer said, no. If you're worried that the guy's alive, then Pekuch Nefesh is doicher anything. And if you're really worried about the guy's alive, you would Mechal Shabbos, and you would do proactive, you would save him, you would get him out of the avalanche. So, Rabbi side, what does this guy do with brain death? We will see. It actually has a lot to do with brain death. But right now, what we did today was, we did the famous Moses Mendelssohn, and the writing to the Yavitz, and the Meretchiz, and they have 4 Gemaras that seem to bud rest their view, but we have a pretty strong Gemara that no, you don't have to wait at all. And next week we will continue this B'li Neder.